Imagine a woman sitting in a quiet, sterile clinic in early 2026. She isn't talking to a therapist about her childhood or unpacking her trauma. Instead, she's wearing what looks like a delicate, translucent mesh across her forehead, a web of silicon filaments pulsing with a faint, rhythmic blue light. For 10 years, she was told her depression was a narrative she needed to rewrite, a mindset she had to fix. But as the monitor beside her flickers to life, it reveals a much colder reality. It shows a series of jagged, frantic electrochemical spikes, the visual signature of a prehistoric smoke detector alarm that has been ringing, uninterrupted, for 3 years straight. She isn't sad in the way we usually mean it. Her brain is simply trying to execute a million-year-old survival algorithm in a world of infinite scrolling, supernormal stimuli, and algorithmic outrage. It's a hardware crash, not a software bug. She is an apex predator trapped in a digital zoo, and her biology has finally surrendered to the noise of an environment it was never designed to inhabit. What's striking is what happens next. The technician doesn't offer a comforting word or new prescription. They simply adjust a slider on a touchscreen, sending a precise, corrective frequency back through the mesh. Within seconds, those jagged spikes begin to smooth out into a calm, rhythmic wave. For the first time in years, the smoke detector in her head just stops. This is the shift from the talking cure to the neurological patch. We've spent a century trying to heal the mind through conversation, treating the ghost in the machine. But the latest breakthroughs in brain-computer interfaces suggest we've been looking at the wrong map. What if your mental health isn't about your thoughts at all? What if we are all just running obsolete biological wetware that desperately needs a 21st century update just to survive the world we've built? So that's the core of what we're digging into today. This is the era of digital psychology. It's about applying our 21st century computational power to debug this million-year-old wetware we're all carrying around.
Exactly, and it's a huge shift, a really radical reframing of what we even mean by human suffering.
It really is. It moves past blame, past narrative, and it just asks a very cold, hard question. Is the problem the brain, or is it the environment we've built for the brain?
And that environmental question is really the mission for this deep dive. We're unpacking this big move away from what we call semantic parsing.
Which is the talking cure, right? Trying to decode distress through language.
Precisely. We're moving from that to electrochemical parsing, actually reading the brain's native language, the spikes, the waves, the actual neural frequencies you saw on that monitor.
Wow.
And the central idea, the thesis we found running through all this research is that so much of what we call mental illness is actually a systems-level malfunction.
A hardware crash.
It's a hardware crash. It's a beautifully designed piece of machinery that is just, completely unequipped for the world it's been dropped into. It can't cope.
I find that idea so compelling because it is, as you said, it's a systems engineering problem, not a personal failure. And if we're going to treat it like an engineering problem, you have to start with the original design specs.
Right. You have to go back to the factory settings.
Exactly. Which takes us to the savannah. So let's talk about evolutionary psychiatry. What's the one big, almost inconvenient question that field really forces us to ask?
The big one is the question of ultimate causation. It's simply, why?
Why?
Why do these traits that seem so debilitating, severe depression, crippling anxiety, why do they even exist in the population? Natural selection is supposed to be this brutal editor.
It should have gotten rid of them ages ago if they were so bad for us.
It should have. If a trait makes you less likely to survive and reproduce, it should be gone. But these things are incredibly common, so that persistence, that suggests they either had some kind of adaptive benefit in the past, or maybe they're just an unavoidable byproduct of some other system that is beneficial.
Okay, so a traditional psychiatrist might ask, how does the brain produce fear? And get a very biochemical answer.
Right. They talk about the amygdala neurotransmitters. That's a proximate question, a how question.
But evolutionary psychiatry asks the why. Why do we even have a fear mechanism that works that way in the first place? What was its original purpose?
Precisely. And that question leads us directly to the cornerstone concept of the whole field. Evolutionary mismatch.
The mismatch.
Our entire psychological toolkit, everything from our stress response to how we read social cues, it was all forged in the Pleistocene in what we call the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, the EEA.
The hunter-gatherer world.
That's it. You have to picture it. Small, kin-based bands, maybe 50 to 150 people. Your life depends on intense physical activity, and the threats you face are immediate and acute.
A predator, a broken leg, getting kicked out of the group.
Exactly. And our brains are optimized, perfectly optimized to handle that environment. The problem is the modern world is just. It's completely alien to those design specs.
It's a space-age world running on Stone Age brains.
That's the mismatch, and that's where the pathology, the suffering comes from. It's not a bug in the code, it's an incompatibility with the new operating system.
And this framework, this idea of mismatch, it also helps us solve a really thorny problem that psychiatry has always had, which is, how do you even define a disorder objectively?
Yes. It's a huge problem because the traditional methods, I mean, if you look at the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
It's basically a committee vote, right?
It is. It's a consensus document. Experts vote on what counts as a disorder and what doesn't. And that means the definitions can be incredibly fluid. They can change with the culture.
And you see that throughout history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The most famous example, of course, is homosexuality being listed as a mental disorder until 1973 when it was removed by a vote. That wasn't a scientific discovery. It was a cultural shift.
A reflection of changing values, not biological fact.
Exactly. Or you can go back even further to things like drapetomania in the 19th century, which was a supposed mental illness that caused enslaved people to want to run away. It's just... When your diagnosis is based on what society finds inconvenient, you're not doing science. You're enforcing social norms.
So the evolutionary approach gives us an escape hatch from that. It offers a more objective foundation.
It does. It comes from a concept called harmful dysfunction, which gives you a two-part test.
Okay, what are the two parts?
The first part is dysfunction. A mental mechanism is only dysfunctional if it's failing to do what evolution designed it to do. An eye's function is to see. If it can't see, it's dysfunctional, period. It doesn't matter what culture you're in.
So it's tied to its biological purpose, not a social judgment.
Right. But then you need the second part, which is harm. That dysfunction also has to be causing harm to the person, and that part is judged by current social standards.
Ah, so it's a hybrid.
Yeah.
It grounds the dysfunction part in objective biology, but acknowledges that harm is culturally defined. That's a really powerful distinction.
It is. It stops us from just labeling things we don't like as a disease. You have to prove the biological machinery is actually broken relative to its design. And to do that, to really investigate it properly, the field relies on a tool called Tinbergen's 4 questions.
Okay, so we've touched on this a bit, the proximate how and the ultimate why. Let's break those 4 questions down using something concrete like anxiety. How would we look at anxiety through those 4 lenses?
Right, so it forces a complete picture. The first question is mechanism. That's a proximate how question.
And the hardware.
The hardware. How is anxiety physically produced? The amygdala fires, you get a cortisol release, glutamate activity goes up. It's the immediate physical process.
Straightforward enough. What's number 2?
Number 2 is ontogeny. It's also a proximate how question, but it's about development. How does that anxiety system develop over a single person's lifetime?
So your childhood, learned fears, gene-environment interactions, that kind of thing.
Precisely. And those 2 mechanism and ontogeny, that's basically where most of traditional psychiatry and neuroscience live. They are essential for treatment, obviously, but they don't explain why the trait exists at all.
Which is where the ultimate questions come in.
Exactly. Question 3 is adaptive function, the ultimate why. What purpose did anxiety serve in our evolutionary past? Why was it useful? And the hypothesis there is that it's a threat management system, a risk calculator.
And the 4th?
The 4th is phylogeny. Also an ultimate why, but it's about the history of the trait across species. We look at other primates, other mammals, and we see anxiety-like behaviors. We see threat detection, risk aversion.
So we know it's not just a human thing, it's ancient.
It's ancient. It's a shared, conserved mechanism. And when you put all 4 of those answers together, you get this incredibly rich picture. You understand the original purpose of the system, which then lets you see exactly how and why it's failing in our modern world.
It's a paradigm shift. It takes the conversation from your brain is broken to something more like your brain is running a perfectly good algorithm for spotting lions, but it's misapplying it to your overflowing inbox.
That is the perfect analogy. And it's the perfect way to get into our next section where we're going to apply this exact thinking to the 2 biggest canaries in the coal mine, anxiety and depression.
Let's start with that alarm system you mentioned, anxiety. The opening story called it a prehistoric smoke detector.
What is it about the design of that system that makes it so prone to Well, overreacting.
It's designed to overreact. That's a feature, not a bug.
Sure.
And the design principle behind it is called the smoke detector principle.
Okay.
Think about any defensive system. Evolution will always optimize it to avoid the most catastrophic possible failure, even if that means putting up with a lot of smaller, annoying failures.
So it's biased toward false alarms.
Massively biased toward false alarms. Think of the smoke detector in your house. The cost of a false positive, it beeping because you're making toast, it's just annoyance. It's trivial.
Right. But the cost of a false negative, it failing to go off during a real fire, is catastrophic. Your house burns down, you could die. So any sane engineer, and Evolution is a pretty sane engineer, will tune that detector to be hypersensitive.
Better 1,000 false alarms than one missed fire.
Exactly. And the classic savanna analogy really drives it home.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so you're a hominid on the savanna. You hear a rustle in the tall grass. It could be a monkey or it could be a lion. Now, if you flee and it was just a monkey, you've wasted maybe 100 calories. That's a false positive.
A minor inconvenience.
A very minor inconvenience. But if you don't flee and it was a lion, that's a false negative. The cost isn't 100 calories. It's your entire genetic lineage. It's everything.
The selection pressure is just immense.
It's absolute. So Evolution selected for brains that ran away from every rustle. Running from 99 shadows to avoid one lion is the winning strategy. And our chronic anxiety today is just that same system running as designed, but the rustles are now an ambiguous text message or a news alert.
And what's so fascinating is how specific that tuning is. The system is still primed for what are called prepared stimuli.
Yes, we are biologically prepared to learn to fear things that were threats in the EEA, snakes, spiders, heights, angry faces, and this is a huge one, social exclusion.
But those threats are all abstract now.
The fear is ancient, the trigger is new. The same biological alarm that went off when you were at risk of being ostracized from your tribe, which was a literal death sentence, that exact same panic system now fires because of a bad performance review.
It's an overzealous protector. And that brings us to the case of Eris, the day trader. His story is a perfect illustration of this hardware mismatch.
It really is. Eris was immersed in this hyper-modern digital world. Multiple screens, a constant high-frequency stream of data price changes, news feeds, market sentiment.
And his brain just couldn't tell the difference between that and a physical threat.
It couldn't. The BCI monitoring was crystal clear. It showed this electrochemical signature of a persistent, high-alert fear response. Jagged, high-amplitude spikes coming from the amygdala and brainstem. It was neurobiologically indistinguishable from someone being stalked by a predator.
So his immense stress wasn't a character flaw or a failure to cope. It was his perfectly functional nervous system being subjected to an input it was never, ever designed to handle.
Exactly. His body was in a safe, air-conditioned office, but his nervous system was in the middle of a nonstop lion attack. The alarm was just stuck in the on position. And realizing that anxiety is an evolutionary trade-off, that's the key. Because if the problem is technical, maybe the solution can be technical too.
Okay, so if anxiety is the alarm that won't shut off, what about depression? It feels like the opposite. It's not a loud alarm, it's a total system shutdown. How could a state that's so debilitating, loss of energy, anhedonia, low mood, how could that have any adaptive purpose?
It's a great question because it seems so counterintuitive. And the answer is probably that depression isn't one single thing. It's likely a set of different adaptations. But there are at least two really compelling hypotheses for its function.
Let's start with the first one, which is about social dynamics.
That's the social rank theory. It views depressive symptoms as a kind of involuntary strategy for dealing with social defeat.
So if you lose a fight for status in the group.
Right. In a small hunter-gatherer band, if you challenge the dominant individual for resources or mates and you lose, continuing that fight is incredibly costly. You risk injury, death, or being cast out.
So depression is a way of signaling surrender.
It's an involuntary yielding strategy. The symptoms, social withdrawal, low motivation, submissive posture, low self-esteem, are all powerful biological signals to the winner that say, I give up, I accept my lower rank, you don't have to attack me anymore.
And that stops the conflict and lets you stay in the group.
It keeps you in the group, which, even at the lowest rung of the ladder, is infinitely better for survival than being alone on the savannah. It's a conflict minimization program.
That makes a lot of sense. So what's the other big idea? It has to do with that feeling of intense obsessive thinking, the rumination.
Yes, that's the analytical rumination hypothesis, or ARH.
The shutdown is meant to force you to think.
Exactly. The ARH suggests that the low mood, the loss of pleasure, the withdrawal, they all serve a critical cognitive purpose. They force you into an intense, uninterrupted analysis of a very complex problem.
What kind of problem?
Usually a major social or strategic failure. A failed relationship, a disastrous hunting decision, a conflict that's threatening your entire future in the group.
So the anhedonia, the fact that nothing feels good anymore, isn't just a random symptom, it's a feature.
It's a feature. It's an energy conservation mechanism. The brain is essentially following a resource management principle called the marginal value theorem.
Okay, you'll have to break that one down.
It's a concept from foraging theory. It basically says an animal should stop looking for food in one patch when the effort it's spending starts to yield less food than the average of the whole environment.
So when the returns diminish, you move on. How does that apply to depression?
In a depressive state, the brain has concluded that your current strategies, socializing, pursuing goals, whatever, are yielding very low or even negative returns because of this big underlying problem. So it enforces a shutdown. It cuts power to everything non-essential like fun and energy and redirects all of that cognitive processing power to solving the critical problem.
So rumination isn't just pointless worry. It's your brain's operating system forcing a safe mode reboot to run diagnostics after a catastrophic failure.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The problem is that in the modern world, the problems we ruminate on are often abstract and unsolvable. Climate change, political turmoil, a massive corporate failure.
So the system gets stuck.
The system gets stuck in safe mode because the diagnostics never finish. The problem can't be solved by just thinking harder about it.
Now, it's really important to stress a point that the researcher Randall Snesso makes here. Just because we can see the utility in low mood doesn't mean we shouldn't treat it.
Oh, absolutely not. That would be a huge mistake, the naturalistic fallacy. It's like saying we shouldn't use anesthesia for surgery because pain is a useful, evolved signal. That's absurd.
Of course. But what this evolutionary view does provide is a powerful tool for destigmatization.
That's maybe its greatest therapeutic contribution. It completely removes the element of personal or moral failure.
Your suffering isn't a sign that you're weak or that you just need to think more positively.
Right. It's a technical issue. It's a frustrating, painful, but ultimately understandable legacy of a system that was designed for a world that's long gone. And just knowing that can be incredibly powerful for people. It allows for a kind of self-compassion.
And that brings us to the world that broke the hardware, the digital world. Let's get into section 3 and talk about the algorithmic cage and the work of John B. Calhoun. His experiments are deeply disturbing.
They are. The behavioral sink. Calhoun built these mouse utopias called Universe 25. He gave the mice everything they could possibly need. Unlimited food, water, no predators, perfect climate.
A paradise.
A total paradise. And at first the population boomed. But as the density increased, even with unlimited resources, their social structures just completely fell apart.
What happened?
You saw a total breakdown. Males became hyper-aggressive or completely passive. Females stopped caring for their young. Mating rituals ceased. The whole society just collapsed into what he called a behavioral sink. And the key insight was that it wasn't scarcity that caused the collapse. It was social overcrowding and a loss of purpose.
And the argument we're exploring is that our digital world, our algorithmic cage, is creating a similar kind of psychological sink.
That's the fear. Not that we'll run out of resources, but that we'll lose our sense of meaning because of what you could call outsourced cognition.
We're letting the algorithms do the thinking for us.
We are. When we delegate our problem solving, our memory, our creativity, our decision making to these incredibly powerful AIs, what's left for us to do? The risk is that we become biological spectators in a synthetic environment. The very challenges that our brains evolved to solve are just gone.
And into that vacuum rushes this endless stream of what are called supernormal stimuli.
Yes, our brains evolved for, rich, real, intermittent social signals. Now we get a 247 engineered fire hose of content that's designed specifically to hijack our ancient reward pathways.
It's bypassing our rational prefrontal cortex and going straight for the limbic system.
Absolutely. We're bombarded with hyper-optimized stimuli, algorithmic outrage, digitally perfected images of lives we can't have, endless little dopamine hits from notifications. The intensity and the frequency are just Inhuman.
And again, the BCI data shows us the scar this leaves on the brain. It's called functional overload.
Our prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain, it evolved to manage a social world of, maybe 150 people? That's Dunbar's number. Now we're asking it to process data streams related to billions of people at speeds that are millions of times faster than anything in the EEA. It's completely overwhelmed. The system redlines.
What does that redlining actually look like neurobiologically? What do you see on the monitor?
It looks like chaos. You see this massive spike in functional connectivity, but it's erratic. The neural potentials are high frequency, high amplitude, all over the place. It's the signature of a system just spinning its wheels, dumping enormous energy into processing loops that go nowhere. One of the researchers called it a physical bruise on the brain's activity map.
And we have a human story for this too. The case of May, the content curator.
May's job was literally to be the human filter for a massive tech platform. She was processing millions of bits of information an hour. The cognitive load, the functional workload on her prefrontal cortex was just astronomical, unprecedented in human history.
And her eventual severe depression was seen not as a personal story, but as a system failure.
It was a system shutdown. Her brain was trying to execute that ancient, energy-saving, safe mode program, the analytical rumination hypothesis, in response to a data stream of impossible frequency and complexity.
The dysfunction wasn't in her, it was in the interaction, in the impossible task that this new digital incentive structure created.
And that incentive structure is the final piece of the cage. This isn't happening by accident. The entire system is optimized. The business model of social media is based on an advertising flywheel that demands one thing: your constant attention.
And that creates incentives that are actively hostile to our Stone Age brains.
Totally hostile. The algorithms learn that the best way to keep you engaged is through outrage, anxiety, and social comparison. Those emotions drive clicks. So the system pressures us, it molds our behavior to fit its needs, not our own. It keeps us in that state of hyper-arousal and overload because that's what's profitable.
That's a terrifying thought, that we're being manipulated into a state of psychological distress by a system that's just following its own machine logic for profit. So if the problem is this systemic, this technical, then the solution has to be technical as well. Which brings us to the final part of our deep dive, the technological patch.
This is the big pivot. This is where we stop trying to find the meaning in the suffering and start treating it like the system failure it is. We move from semantic parsing to electrochemical parsing.
From the talking cure to the hardware fix.
Exactly. It's deliberately desentimentalized. We're not trying to make you feel better about the problem. We're trying to fix the underlying malfunction at the level of the circuit.
So what is this neurological patch actually doing at a basic level?
Its goal is to directly calibrate the electrochemical baseline of specific neural networks. It's trying to artificially create and maintain neurohomeostasis.
So it's like a thermostat for the brain.
It's a perfect analogy. It lets you cheat. It lets you maintain a stable internal state, even when the external digital environment is chaotic and hostile. And the main way it does this is through closed-loop neurostimulation.
And closed loop is the key phrase there. This isn't just zapping the brain constantly.
No, not at all. It's a responsive system. It's always listening. It detects the signature of a maladaptive pattern starting to form, and only then does it deliver a very precise, very brief corrective pulse to stop it.
We know that many of these conditions, like PTSD or depression, they have these characteristic pathological brain rhythms.
They do. They're like biomarkers. The technology learns to recognize the specific pathological wave for that individual, and then it injects a countersignal to restore the healthy rhythm, sometimes within milliseconds.
So let's talk about how this works in practice. Starting with the non-invasive stuff, the external mesh from the opening story, what can that do?
A non-invasive BCI, like a high-density EEG cap, it monitors your neural activity right through the scalp. When it detects those frantic spikes of anxiety, for example, it can provide real-time feedback.
How? What kind of feedback?
It could be a gentle auditory tone, a slight visual cue. It basically acts as a form of operant conditioning for your brain circuits. It's teaching your brain, at a subconscious level, to pull back from that pathological state and return to its baseline.
And we have the story of Julian, the retired teacher who went through this.
Right. Julian had treatment-resistant depression for decades, tried every kind of talk therapy, every medication, nothing worked. So they shifted focus. They stopped asking about his childhood and just started looking at his neural data.
They weren't interested in the why of his sadness anymore.
Not at all. They were only interested in the fact that his internal system was running inefficiently. They used a non-invasive closed-loop system that just monitored his electrochemical baseline and made tiny, real-time adjustments. It was like an automated ballast for his brain, keeping him on an even keel.
They fixed the hardware without ever needing to debug the software, so to speak.
That's it. But for some conditions that are deeper or more severe, you need to go under the hood. You need invasive techniques.
RNS and DBS. Deep brain stimulation?
Exactly. Responsive neurostimulation, or RNS, uses implanted electrodes. It's adapted from epilepsy treatments. The electrodes are placed in very specific deep brain structures, and they are constantly listening for the onset of a pathological event.
A neural storm.
A neural storm. And when it detects one starting, it delivers a tiny electrical pulse to shut it down before it even begins. The real challenge here, though, isn't the stimulation, it's the timing.
The timing has to be perfect.
It has to be better than perfect. We're talking about a biological system that's evolving on a millisecond scale, but even our fastest computers have an input-output delay, maybe 10 milliseconds.
And 10 milliseconds sounds like nothing, but in this context, it's an eternity.
It's a disaster. Think about it. If your corrective pulse arrives just 10 milliseconds late, you might miss the trough of the pathological wave and hit the peak instead.
So instead of dampening the bad rhythm, you actually amplify it.
You make it worse. You can destabilize the entire system. It's a massive engineering challenge.
So how do you solve that? It seems almost impossible.
With incredibly advanced control theory. The kind of math you'd see in designing a fighter jet, not in a hospital. They have to use complex methods to correct for the gain error in the system, to predict where the brainwave will be in 10 milliseconds and fire accordingly. It's less like psychology and more like high-frequency trading on Wall Street.
This entire approach just demands a completely new way of even measuring the mind.
It absolutely does. It requires what some are calling high-dimensional neuropsychology, or neuropsychology 3.0.
Because the old ways of testing were just too simple. They suffered from the flatland fallacy.
That's the perfect way to put it. Traditional neuropsychology, with its paper and pencil tests or simple computer tasks, was like trying to understand a three-dimensional sphere by only looking at the two-dimensional circle it makes as it passes through a flat plane.
You see the circle get bigger and smaller, and you think that's the whole story.
Right, you completely miss the depth, the complexity, the real dynamic nature of the object. We were measuring these complex functions like attention or memory in these very artificial, isolated, low-dimensional ways. And the tests just weren't very good. They didn't predict real-world performance well at all.
So neuropsychology 3.0 moves into, what? Virtual reality.
Into ecologically valid simulations. We're now using extended reality, XR, to create these incredibly rich, dynamic 3D environments, virtual grocery stores, virtual classrooms, driving simulators.
Things that mimic the complexity of the real world.
Exactly. And we can track everything, eye movements, head movements, response times, how a person handles multiple tasks at once. We're not measuring an abstract concept anymore. We're measuring a person's actual function in a realistic context.
And that rich high-dimensional data is what you need to build the most advanced systems of all, the dual-loop system.
This is the absolute cutting edge. This is where you combine the internal implant with an external AI-powered wearable. And the best way to understand it is to look at how it's being used for something like PTSD.
Okay, so a dual-loop system for PTSD. Break it down for us. What's the inner loop?
The inner loop is the RNS implant. It's the neural guardian. You have electrodes implanted deep in the brain, often targeting the amygdala, the fear center. And it's just listening 204/7 for the specific neural signature of a flashback or a panic attack starting.
Which is, what does it look like?
A key biomarker they've found is a sudden, excessive surge of power in the theta band, specifically between 5 and 9 hertz.
So the RNS sees that theta wave spike.
And it immediately delivers a sub-second electrical pulse to abort that neural cascade right at the circuit level. It stops the flashback before the person is even consciously aware it's beginning. It's the ultimate safety net.
Okay, that's the internal guardian. What's the outer loop doing at the same time?
The outer loop is all about environmental awareness. This is a wearable system. Think smart glasses with a camera and microphone, and a smartwatch measuring your physiology, heart rate, skin conductivity, motion.
And all that data is being fed into a large language model, an AI.
The multimodal LLM. It's acting like a hyper-aware digital assistant. It fuses all that data together. So the watch detects a sudden heart rate spike. At the same instant, the glasses hear a loud bang, like a car backfiring, and see that you're in a crowded street.
The AI puts two and two together.
It performs a rapid contextual analysis and says, high probability of an imminent trigger event. And then it can intervene preemptively, non-invasively.
How? What does it do?
Through the smart glasses, it might subtly alter your vision, maybe narrowing the field of view to reduce overwhelming peripheral stimuli. Through a tiny earpiece, it might play a pre-recorded calming phrase from a loved one, or a simple guided breathing instruction. It's a context-aware, personalized intervention.
But the real magic is how the two loops talk to each other.
That is the breakthrough. The RNS implant log gives you the ground truth of what happened inside the brain. It says, at 2:37 p.m., a pathological theta rhythm was detected and aborted. The wearable log gives you the context. It says, at 2.36 and 59 seconds, a loud bang was detected.
So the AI learns. It connects the external trigger to the internal neural storm with perfect precision.
It learns incredibly fast, and it gets better and better at predicting triggers and managing them before the brain even has a chance to go into crisis mode. And the ultimate goal here, the beautiful part of this, is to eventually make the implant obsolete.
You want to transition the patient off the hardware.
That's the therapeutic dream. The implant is the bridge that provides safety and stability. But as the external, non-invasive wearable gets smarter and trains the person's coping skills, the reliance on the RNS implant can be tapered down. You're aiming for a new kind of technologically mediated stability that doesn't require an implant for the rest of your life.
That is. It's just a completely revolutionary way to think about this.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive talking about the failure of our biology in a world we created. And we're ending it with the idea that the only path forward is to use our technology to build a bridge, a patch, for that obsolete biology.
It's a huge admission, really. It's acknowledging that the capacity for things like anxiety and depression is just. It's a part of our universal human hardware. But the mismatch with our environment is now so extreme that we're basically entering an era where we need mandatory live updates.
Technological prostheses, not to enhance us into superhumans, but just to restore us to a functional baseline in the world we've built.
Right. Whether it's an invasive implant or a non-invasive BCI, we're now at a point where we require technological support just to sustain the mind stability in the face of our own relentless innovation.
The age of digital psychology is defined by the tools we have to build to keep our own million-year-old wetware from crashing. The suffering might be ancient, but the solutions are brand new.